All right. Hello and welcome to the Sexuality and Education Settings for Students with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities webinar. My name is Tanisha Clark and I am a Senior Program Manager here at AUCD. We would like to thank you all for joining us today. Before we begin, I would like to address a few logistical details. We will provide a brief introduction of our speaker, but first, because of the number of participants, we're asking that you please keep your audio muted throughout the call. Instructions will be provided shortly on how to ask questions and share your comments. Also, closed captioning is provided on this webinar. Simply click on the closed caption box on the bottom of your screen in order to enable it. If you have any questions in regards to this, please feel free to share something in the chat box and we'll help you. This entire webinar is being recorded and will be available on the AUCD website following this webinar. The link to the archive will be shared on the Sexual Health listserv once it is available. There will also be a short evaluation survey at the close of the webinar. We invite you to please provide feedback and also just provide suggestions for future topics. So now please join me in welcoming co-chair Lindsay, who will take it from here.
Thanks, Tanisha. My name is Lindsay Sauvé. I'm one of two Lindsays who are the co-chairs of the Sexual Health, AUCD Sexual Health SIG. I'm joined with my co-chair, Lindsay Mullis. Thank you for being here today. We're really excited to share out about this topic. I first want to put in a plug for the AUCD Sexual Health Special Interest Group, which is what SIG stands for. If you're not a member of the SIG, we would like you to join. You don't have to work for a UCED or a LEND to be a member of the AUCD Sexual Health SIG. If you're involved in sexual health education or any way, shape, or form that topic for people with disabilities, you're interested in learning about more webinars, work that's going on in the field in this topic, we have annual meetings and we put on regular webinars, including our Sex Talk webinars, which is hosted and delivered by self-advocates, people who experience disabilities. So there's my little pitch for the AUCD Sexual Health SIG. We're thrilled to have Katie here with us today. This topic has been heavily requested by SIG members, sexuality education in school settings. So ask and you shall receive. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Katie and then we'll get going. So Katie Thune is here with us today. She is an educator, author, and advocate for people with disabilities. She has her teaching license in health education and special education K-12, as well as her MA in education, and has worked as a teacher for St. Paul Public Schools for 12 years. She has done extensive curriculum writing on relationships and sexuality education for people with disabilities. Thank you, Katie, for being here, and turn it over to you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lindsay and Tanisha and everyone for finding value in this such important topic. So thanks for everyone being here today. It's really exciting. I love talking about this with anyone who will listen. So here we all are together. So great. So a lot of the information I'm going to share today is just throughout my experience being in the schools. 8 years ago is when I left teaching. I was teaching middle school health education as well as special ed for 12 years, and 8 years ago left. So I've been working on this stuff for a really long time. And I'll share more as we go through today about me. But I'm so happy to be here with all of you. This is our plan for today. So we'll do in a moment, just a little bit of centering and getting everybody on the same page. A brief intro with the background of sex ed for people with IDD, thinking a bit about what could equitable sex ed look like for people with IDD. And then the second half of today will be sharing some strategies and conversation tips that you can use with students and the people that you support and with your families and just the people in your life. So, and then we'll close it out. I just want to put out this choose your own adventure type thing with these questions or comments. So if you have questions, please send them in the chat box. If you want to send them anonymously to Lindsay Mullis, you could do that. She is the other co-chair of the committee. And you can always raise your hand in the participant box, and we can unmute you. We will probably have a few minutes for Q&A at the end, but just send them throughout as you think of them. And if we don't get to all the questions, you'll know how to get in touch with me as we go through this. And I can always send follow-up answers or thoughts and resources for questions that we talk about. So as we move into this, just thinking about some agreements, remembering this is, of course, a non-judgmental, safe space. Participate at your own comfort level. If you want to turn your video on, I love to see your faces. No pressure. All questions, comments, ideas are welcome. And of course, take care of yourself. We're not in this for very long. This is only an hour, so hopefully you can make it through. But obviously, if stuff comes up, do what you need to do. With that, I'd love to start us out with a little centering. I incorporate mindfulness into all of the programming I do, whether it be classes or trainings or workshops or anything, because I just know that this topic can bring up feelings for people, and it's just a really helpful way to start and end classes. So I think I'll actually stop sharing my screen and turn so you can see me a little bit bigger. So I'll pin my video here. If you can see me, I don't know, maybe you can't. Nope. Okay, no, I lost it. In my video. Okay. So we use this breathing ball to take some breaths. It's a great visual for people to see, particularly students with disabilities. And I just want you right now to sit up tall wherever you're at. Maybe roll your shoulders back and take a deep breath in and then let it out. We'll do 4 more just like that. Breath in and out. Inhale through your nose. Exhale. And 2 more. And one last breath, the deepest breath yet today. And let it go. So hopefully now you are feeling ready to talk about this topic, right? And to be here together, connected, thinking about all of these things. Just a little bit about me. You'll get the slides to this, and so you can look at this later. Sexuality for All Abilities is the program we're talking about today. The other program that we've created is The Power of Me, and you can find info on our website on that. Now, just, we're all centered, we're all connected. We've taken these breaths together, and I just want to put a few of these phrases out here to get us now thinking of the same things, remembering that all humans are sexual beings, regardless of disability ability. We all humans will go through puberty. So we are all sexual beings. Looks a little different for everyone, but we're all there. We also know sexual health conversations can bring up some feelings and emotions and stuff. And that's why I like to start with the breathing, because sometimes it comes up for us and it's kind of when we least expect it. But we also know that it can come up with our students, these feelings and emotions, with their families, with other staff that we're working with, particularly paras, if you have them working in classrooms with you, and other support staff. And just to remember that can come up. Sex ed is a lifelong process. It's not that one and done conversation, working with little ones all the way through adults. It's very important. We're all learning about ourselves as sexual beings as we get older. And of course, none of us are perfect. I don't always have the answer to everything. I say the wrong thing at the wrong time. But then we apologize and move on, right? And we try again. And we have to have these conversations, even though they are a little awkward and confusing, and we might say the wrong thing at the wrong time. But if we have these conversations more and more, it's just going to make things easier and less awkward long term. So with that, I like to put up this image just to remind us what we're talking about when we use the term sexuality. A lot of people get nervous and we're thinking, oh, we're teaching people how to have sex. We're only talking about pregnancy or human reproduction. And those are all parts of it, but it's just a small piece of it. And so I just want to put this image up there that sexuality is so much more. There's, we're talking about feelings, we're talking about boundaries, we're talking about just relationships with other people and ourselves. And so my hope for this next hour together is that you're just leaving feeling a little bit more comfortable and perhaps with a tool or two, not worrying about taking away too much. You'll have my contact info. You can reach out for more resources or questions that you have. And so this is kind of the start or a continuing conversation for many of you. So with that, I just want to shift and start a little bit with the background and just the why a lot of us are thinking about sexual health education for people with IDD. And a lot of it does start with the high rate of assault for those with disabilities. And so you see these numbers in the screen: 80% of women, 30% of men will be victims of sexual assault at some point. About half of them may have 10 or more abusive incidents in their life. And the bottom one is kind of a newer number that was run by the Justice Department, that those with IDD are sexually assaulted at a rate of 7 times higher than those without disabilities. That number does not include people living in group homes or institutions. And so I think of just how high this number is, and we know that education can for sure help to lower that number. We just have to have more conversations. Some of the reasons that we've thought about of why are people with disabilities more vulnerable to assault, and just where society's at, of course, perhaps the aspect of the disability, thinking maybe that person also has a physical disability, might make them more vulnerable in a certain way. Perhaps that person has an invisible disability like autism or FASD, and that may make them more vulnerable in a totally different way than someone with Down syndrome, for example. So everyone has all these different things going on, and it's just really important to think about all of that. We know the lack of sex education is so big, and we'll get more into that as we go through. Dependency and learned compliance is a piece I sometimes think about of why are people more vulnerable. And I think of just how many caregivers people have had throughout their life, people with disabilities having PCAs and paras and just so many support people caring for them and helping out every day. And so at some point, having all these people, you've just sort of developed this learned compliance. Yes, you can help me in the bathroom. Yes, you can change my diaper. Yes, you can change me. And you just sort of could let go of any body autonomy you thought that you did deserve or need. And the isolation piece is a big one too. And I mean, right now, being in a pandemic, that's one type of isolation, of course, but there's so many other pieces to the isolation. And right here in Minnesota, it's snowing right now. That makes it a lot harder for someone to get out. And in Arizona right now, it's really, really, really hot, and that might make it really hard for someone to get out. And so there's all these different pieces of isolation. And just I know several people with disabilities have fewer opportunities for social to practice all of these skills that we have been learning. So with that, I guess I'd love for you all, if you're open to it, in the chat box to kind of write down, thinking back to your experience of sex ed, where did you learn about sex ed? Was it from school, family, friends, back of the bus, magazines, the internet? We all have had different experiences. And I think that's an important thing to think about, is how most of us are learning different things at different times. And lots of people, people are saying friends, and so lots of people from school, different books, abstinence only, or what some people say it, it's I know a lot of people have experienced like fear-based education. Like, if you do this, then if you get pregnant, we're going to kick you out of the house. If you do this, then this is going to happen. And so I feel like there's been lots of threats, lots of shame in the past with this. And we know, sex ed can be fun. Just before we were starting, we were talking about, maybe we should start with that Salt and Pepper song. Let's talk about sex, baby. It can be fun to talk about this stuff. It's good stuff. And what I have found whenever I was teaching in the schools, this is when there were no like icky behaviors in the classroom. the kids were actually listening. All the students would listen because they just so were craving this information and someone to answer their questions. Um, so I think about this, and I think about, add on to that piece having a disability and how much more complicated it makes things. Um, and so I just, I thank you all for sharing in the chat box as we go through. Please continue to do that because it is kind of interesting. Uh, Everyone has these different experiences. In one presentation a while back, there were several people from Canada, and they said, "Oh yeah, like my dad did what most Canadian dads do, and took me out in the canoe and told me about the birds and the bees." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So we all have these different experiences, um, and so when you think about the disability piece, I'm going to put up this next slide, and just thinking about how sex education has failed people with disabilities, but also think about how maybe it has failed so many of us and how much we've learned now as adults as opposed to what we did learn as children in the schools or wherever else we learned. Um, so it's not just people with disabilities that have the lack of education. There's so much more to this, and so many people that are missing. Some states have a law for sex ed in the schools. Some states don't. But it's really hit or miss. Some states say, yeah, it's a law, but you can choose how you teach it. And so then all students are learning different things. The stranger danger principle has been something we, had there a while back. There was a hardcore focus on that. But when you think about it, we have so many strangers in our life, and most of them are not dangerous. And I just think what a scary world to live in if we're teaching that all strangers are dangerous. And so that can be really tough. Sex ed also has been used as abuse prevention, solely abuse prevention for people with disabilities. And there's just so much more that we need to teach. Um, we also know that sometimes people with disabilities are the ones that are doing the assaulting. And so we want to make sure that we teach everything when we're doing this. And that also, people with disabilities can have amazing, healthy, romantic and relationships and friendships. And that's important to talk about too. Reactive education has been used a lot. So like when something happens in the schools or in a setting, then someone might come in and teach about something. That has happened a lot. And I just think of how awesome it would be if we could get to this proactive place of education, of sex education for people with disabilities, and then fewer things are going to happen. The hidden curriculum, just there's so much stuff we're just supposed to know. And we talk about that with a lot of students with autism, but it's so much more. I mean, I I felt there was so much hidden curriculum as I was growing up on the topic of sex ed and sexual health. And I missed a lot of things, and I felt it was really unfair. And so it's not just people with autism that we're thinking about the hidden curriculum. It's not fair that we're supposed to just know these things. We need to teach them. And then the informal stuff, all that stuff we learn from friends. What if you don't have many friends? What if people are pretending to be your friends, but they're not actually your friends? And so, we've encountered so many situations with that. So with all of that, I want to put this up here, just remembering, like, when we think about our hope for sexuality education for people with disabilities, is that it's all of these things, is that it's just accessible to everyone, non-reactive, non-judging, non-shaming, inclusive, and super comprehensive. Like, we're teaching everything, such great stuff. And remembering what comprehensive sex ed is, it's so much more than just sex. And all the while we're teaching how to make these choices and decisions in our lives and in our students' lives, we're practicing self-determination. We're practicing self-advocacy skills. These are a couple of things that it's just like anytime that we're teaching anything in sex education, this is really what we're doing. We're teaching people how to be an advocate for themselves and how to make decisions in their lives, which is really great. So I want to put this slide up here just to think about a few basic helpful strategies for equitable sex education. And then once we kind of talk about these things, I'm going to shift into some more specific activities and conversation starters that you can use with the people in your life. So, looking at this list, these are just things for like teachable moments, just in the moment, not necessarily during classes or formal groups, just in the moment. Teaching accurate terms for private body parts. I mean, this is whenever you're helping or supporting someone with personal care, self-care, we can talk about this stuff. This should start with little ones. I mean, why not call it a butt? Why do we need to call it a tushy? I mean, there's so many reasons why we want to make sure we're using these terms. But just a couple thinking like, if you are to have a romantic relationship someday, you want to be able to use the real words for the body parts when we're working with consent and figuring things out. Also, if someone is actually sexually assaulted, we want them to be able to explain to the doctor or the trusted adult what happened to them, using actual words for the body parts. Talking about body rights, this is one thing. When I was having a conversation with an adult woman with cerebral palsy and interviewing her for my book, actually, and I asked her, I said, when you think back to when you were growing up, what is like the one thing that you wish the teachers and adults in your life had really pushed on you? And she said, body rights, body autonomy. My body belongs to me, and no one gets to touch me unless I say it's okay. And I mean, that's the thing. Like, if we can get that into people's heads, so important. No one gets to touch me unless I say it's okay. And yes, like a caregiver has to touch that person, a doctor has to touch them. But we can talk about exploitative touch versus necessary touch. We can make sure we're asking permission before we actually do touch that person. And just really focus on that it's their right. It's up to them. I think that is so important. Anytime we can bring in a teachable moment, good stuff. Just like anytime, practicing consent all the time. Anytime you're going to give someone a hug, making sure you're asking, is it okay if I give you a hug? Just so we can continue that practice. I mean, you see at the bottom of this list talking about role play and teaching consent, like we can bring that in all the time, every single day. Encouraging assertiveness, appropriate non-compliance. So before I talked about the learned compliance piece, well, we need to make sure that we let people know that it's okay to say no anytime. Anytime something doesn't feel right or uncomfortable, or you're just feeling a little weird, it's okay to say no. It's always okay to say no, even if this is a person that is in power to you. And we need to practice that. I think the repetition, that's the next one on the list, is so important. I feel like often when I talk, when I talk or work with educators, we talk about just using the same language, the same terminology, the same lessons, activities, and just keep repeating them over and over and over. So the concepts stay the same and we don't constantly teach a new concept. When it comes to anything sexual health, healthy relationships related, it's a complex topic. And so if we can really use repetition and teach the same thing over and over and over again, people are going to feel more empowered. And they're going to feel like a really great self-advocate once they understand how to do this stuff. I do think teaching the rules is really great. So again, sexual health, healthy relationships, it's not like this or this. There's so many gray areas. It's well, in this situation, I guess we could do this, but it's like, no, we can't. That's so hard. So anytime we can like put things in a little box or put some rules or guidelines to something, it's super helpful. For example, in one class, I remember a young man in a transition program asking the question, well, give me a rule for hugging. I just need a rule. When is it okay to hug someone? And I struggled with it. I was like, well, I mean, it depends in this situation. And then I stopped myself and I said, okay, here's your rule for hugging. Anytime you want to give someone a hug, you need to ask them for permission, listen to their answer, and respect it. And he said, even my mom? And I said, yeah, even your mom. she might not want a hug, and that's okay, but you need to ask her. And he thought about it and he's like, yeah, oh, okay. And I was like, great, he's got the rule. And then we need to create another rule for the next topic and the next topic. And it can get super overwhelming. But if we have some of this in place for people, it's really, really helpful. Um, the last thing I just want to say on this page before moving on is thinking about role play and how important role play is. However, we want to make sure that when we're role playing appropriate, healthy, okay boundaries and scenarios. We don't want to role play inappropriate boundaries or unhealthy boundaries. It can get so confusing. It can be silly. We can laugh, like if someone gets in your space, and then we're like giggling because we were role playing tickling and how it's not okay to tickle. But we don't want to do that because it's going to get so confusing for the people that you're supporting. And so we can talk about the tickling, and I'll show you different ways that you can talk about that, or find videos and things. But anything we're going to practice, let's make sure we're practicing appropriate boundaries, healthy boundaries, safe boundaries. And so I'm gonna keep moving, but I guess, like, if there are, Lindsay, I have any questions come up that I should touch on before? No. Okay, great. So moving into just a few different strategies, lessons, some conversations, then you'll have the things that I'm going to show you. We'll follow up and give you these resources, and a lot of the tools that I'll share, the easy to get. And so I'll talk about all that. I share this activity because I think this is a really helpful one to think about categorizing the different people in our lives. We have so many people in our lives that we encounter on a daily basis. And when you think about that, it can be so overwhelming. And so this is a helpful tool to put all of these people in our life, these hundreds and hundreds of people, and into 5 different categories. Everyone in our life will fit into one of these categories. And, if they don't fit into family, friends, romantic partner, professional relationship, then there's someone in the public. So that's where all the strangers, all the people we don't know would go. With all of these, everyone is going to have a different list. Everyone's going to have, some people will have tons of people in family and friends. Some people won't have many, and that's okay. Some people might have someone in the romantic partner category. Some people might have more than one. Some people might have none, and that's okay. If someone is in the romantic category, we talk about how it's important that all people are aware that they're in that category. So, like Taylor Swift, for example, has shown up on many of that category for a lot of the people that I've worked with. She's not a romantic partner, she's a crush. And crushes would probably go in a different category. And Taylor Swift, we don't know her, so she would go in the public category. And that's, I guess, all I want to say about that. But professional relationships would be people that, well, sometimes we think of them as like people we pay to work with us, but I also think of it's like coworkers or classmates, things like that. So that's what that is. Then once we kind of can categorize all these different people into these categories, we then can start thinking about the different types of touch or affection or greetings that we use with people in our lives. This is not rocket science. This is a tool that I'm sure all of you have seen, whether it's in the Circles curriculum or if anyone's familiar with Yoga Calm for children, it's a great social emotional curriculum. This is another tool that's used in Yoga Calm, like a community circle, but it's not rocket science. People are familiar. And so it's like thinking that I'm in the center, and then the closest people to me are in the hug, and then a little further out and out. This can be helpful, however, to think about the different places we might use these different types of touch. So maybe we come up with a relationship circle for work. I might work with my best friend, and I would normally put my best friend in the hug circle. But at work, for example, we wouldn't really want to put that person in the hug circle because we don't want to do hugs at work. So there's lots of different ways to use this, but it's a helpful tool. And thinking about right now during a pandemic, we might not do any of the hug, side hug, shake hands, and most everybody is in the wave or peace sign or salute or something like that. Or maybe right now we want to do the shake hands as sort of an elbow bump or something like that. So there's lots of ways that you can use this. But overall, it's important just to remind people that, like, if someone's in my hug circle, it doesn't mean I give them a hug every single time I see them. And so reminding people that this circle will change from day to day, from year to year, even from hour to hour throughout the day. And so we have to constantly remember that we have to ask for consent. And so yeah. So anyways, we have a video on our YouTube channel, and I'll show you how to get to that. We have a lot of like little 60-second videos on our Mad Hatter Wellness YouTube channel, and you have access to all of those. And so there's a few of those that talk about the relationship circle and some of the other tools, and you can use them with the people you support, with your students, maybe with families, just to kind of explain what you might be doing at school or in the workplace or whatever, to carry over the conversation. This is another, rocket science, not rocket science. This is like simple tool, but charts and things like that are really popular in special ed. But rightfully so, they're really helpful. So creating a chart to think about what is a healthy behavior in a relationship, what is an unhealthy behavior in a relationship. And with that, a lot of the time we'll use red, green cards. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But this chart, you could, I'll show you another one. You could create this for different behaviors at school, and then maybe make another one for behaviors on the bus, another one for behaviors at home, or at work, or in the community, or whatever. So it can be very different. Like you see on this one, it says hugs under unhealthy behavior. Hugs are not an unhealthy behavior, but the group that I was working with, they decided we don't want hugs. We're at a high school. In our program, no hugs at school. So this was a chart that we made for that program. So it's just a way to kind of think about what's appropriate, what's okay, what's safe in different settings. A nice way to talk about some of this stuff. Here's another tool that we've created, and there's a video on the channel, on the YouTube channel, that talks about this, and you'll have access to this as a PDF as well, so that you can use it with the people in your life if you want. A lot of the times when we've used this tool, it has been very helpful for staff in the room. Oh, that's why that didn't work out. Oh, okay. But it's kind of helpful to think about how relationships are complicated. They're kind of like a puzzle. And if a piece is missing in a puzzle, the puzzle's not complete, right? So these are the pieces of a healthy relationship. If a piece is missing, it might not be a healthy relationship. Or maybe it is, but something needs to be worked on to make it more healthy. If 2, 3, 4, or all 5 pieces are missing, may want to cut your losses, and maybe that's not a relationship that is safe, or one that you want to be in. But this is thinking about, I get to be myself, just I can be myself, quirky and all, and it's great. We take time to get to know each other, thinking there's not really a rule for time, which is kind of complicated, but we're, usually we don't meet someone and all of a sudden we have a close relationship or a romantic relationship or something like that. It takes time. We know there's compromise, turn taking in relationships. One person doesn't always make all the decisions. Overall, we have fun. We get along. There can definitely be arguments in relationships, in healthy relationships, particularly during a pandemic. However, then, we apologize and we move on in a safe and healthy way. And usually the arguments are brief. And boundaries are respected. I can say no in my relationships. It's healthy, it's okay. And the other person's not going to get mad at me. So these are just, thinking about how all of these pieces fit together to make a healthy relationship. Another tool I was going to share with you is just thinking about some different scenarios. We use these flip books, real cheap on our website, but it's not rocket science. I mean, it's just like using a little tool to think about different scenarios. So in these flip books, we think about the who, the different types of people that are in our lives, caregiver, boss, coworker, teammate, whatever it is, the type of touch, hug, high five, shake hands, text, write about me, social media, whatever, touch my private parts, and then where, at home, at school, at work, in public and private, at the park, something like that. So before, when I was talking about role play and how we want to make sure we practice and role play appropriate and safe boundaries, this is a way to talk about the things and to practice the things that are maybe unhealthy, unsafe, not appropriate. And we talk about these different scenarios by using red and green cards. And so it's not like high tech, super low. I'm a very low tech person. I use like just a little piece of a little card, right? One side is green, one side is red. It's a great way for students who maybe are uncomfortable sharing out loud. Maybe students who are nonverbal can show you if they understand. For students who maybe have more significant disabilities and need more support, you could have two cards and they could do like a visual gaze, an eye gaze to the card, that if it's healthy or unhealthy. So there's lots of ways that you could start to gain a little bit of understanding and think through the different scenarios for all these things. I say on here the words that we try not to use with the red and green cards, or I do want to say thumbs up, thumbs down. You don't need to use red and green. I mean, I would just say thumbs up, green, thumbs down, red. But we talk about not using good and bad. And one of the reasons is, let's say we're sharing a scenario like, my boss tickled me at work. And let's say then the class says, or the group says, that's bad, that's bad. And then, what if that had happened to somebody? Then they might feel that they're bad because that happened to them. And they're not bad because that happened to them. It's a situation that was unsafe, not healthy, not okay, but it doesn't mean that they're bad. And so then I would just explain to the group, you're right. That's unhealthy. That's not okay. That's unsafe. Something like that. So I just, putting it out there, that helps with the, if we're not using words like that, that helps to take the shame out of some of this work and some of these lessons. So moving forward, just a couple more things, and then if there's other questions, or if there are throughout, I don't know if anything's come up yet. Private and public. So this is another thing where we can, we really need to work through with people. This is a thing that's a lot of the times in the hidden curriculum. It's not fair that it's not taught as much as it should be. Private and public is very confusing. A private place is a place that is in bold. We can see it here. It has 3 rules. It belongs to you, you are alone, and people cannot see you. It has to be those 3 rules. So for example, like if you're in a car, it belongs to you, you might be alone, but people can see you because of the windows, right? So it doesn't follow the 3rd rule. And so we want to make sure that all private behaviors are done in a private place. One way to kind of think through some of this in practice is, again, a chart. Really high tech, right? No, low tech, super helpful though, really, really meaningful. Sometimes we'll use like little picture symbols like this. We're working on creating some more using our own illustrations. These are board maker symbols, which are wonderful, but there's not a lot of sexual health topic images for that. So I mean, you can see on here, masturbation is a hand. So we're working on updating some of these images to help students and people understand things a little bit more. But using these little picture symbols of any kind, or just like clip art or whatever you can find, and then putting them in the public and private places and behaviors can be really helpful. Moving forward, just a couple more things. So thinking about safety. Okay, so going back to the like body rights, your body belongs to you. No one gets to touch you unless you say it's okay. So you get to say who touches it, when, and where. We kind of put these 3 rules there. 1, say no. Some people that you support, they might not be able to verbally say no. So maybe we want to say communicate no, depending on the students that you're or the people you're working with. Um, so maybe they're nonverbal or deaf, hard of hearing, and so we want to, instead of saying say no, we can say communicate no, just so we're somehow expressing to the world no, and no means no. Talking about getting away, and sometimes that can be more difficult for some people. Maybe they have limited mobility, maybe they're in a wheelchair, maybe it's just not, they don't feel safe to get away. And so we definitely want to talk about how they can do that, and then it's always okay to get away, and then to tell someone, and to get it thinking about, it's never too late to tell. um, if one person doesn't believe you, to tell someone else. Sometimes we teach a safety network, um, of 3 to 5. I mean, sometimes I like to think of a hand like safety network of 5, and so I have 5 different people, and maybe one of those people is not related to me. That can be one way to think about it, just so we have a variety of people to tell. um, so I wanted to uh, just share some common concerns, as when we think about working with students or adults or people, in whatever setting you do, but mostly, I mean, I think we're focused mostly on school settings today, but in any setting, really, just working with people with IDD. And these are common things that have come up often for me, for colleagues that I've worked with. A lot of this stuff is in my book, um, and with lots of ideas and how to work through some of this stuff. But just thinking about some of this, really, that we already talked about it, the private public, so much confusion, and just thinking about how can we put some rules around some of that stuff, like we talked about the 3 rules of a private place, really important. But there is a lot of confusion. Well, if it feels good to touch my penis, why can't I do that right here during story time? But you're in story time in a whole class of people, and it's so, and that's not okay. But then again, there's the hidden curriculum, and so we have to teach that. Just understanding the difference between fact and myth is a big one. I think for all people, not just people with disabilities. I think a lot of students growing up are very confused about, you know, so many different things. Well, can I get pregnant in a hot tub? Or one of the first questions that was asked when I was teaching sex ed, I was like, what, 22, maybe, just a little thing. And this 8th grade boy asked, is it healthy for a girl to swallow semen? And I was like, whoo. And this is what I want to say about that is, when the way I answered was probably not appropriate, or I wouldn't say not appropriate, just it wasn't the best response, right? But again, none of us are perfect. We might say the wrong thing at the wrong time. And I quickly corrected it. But he asked, is it healthy for a girl to swallow semen? And I said, well, it's not on the food pyramid. Oops. Then I quickly said, but let's talk about diseases and infections. And then we talked a lot about that. But I didn't ruin people. And so it's like, I didn't ruin this kid or the other kids in the class for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. And I think that's what I really want to remind people as we get into all of this stuff. Just like, we just need to have more conversations. It's okay to mess up. And then you just try again. And I never answered the question that, again, I never got that question again. But anyways, getting easily pressured by peers, this is so common. One young man that I was working with a while back, was pressured by his peers. He really wanted to be friends. This was a middle school setting, really wanted friends, and just really had a hard time making friends, didn't know like a healthy way to make friends. So these peers of his said, well, we'll be your friend if you go and touch her boobs. And of course, so he did, and he comes back and they said, well, we'll only be your friend if you do it again. And so of course he did it again. And then who's the one that got in trouble? This is so tricky, and it's just really common. It's so hard to know, is this a true friend? Are they taking advantage of me? And it's just, and it's tricky. It's really tricky. And that's, going to the next one, getting in trouble for behaviors they don't know are inappropriate for school or the workplace, or they didn't know at all. They were just trying to make friends. but just not understanding, oh, I can't touch my penis here, even though it feels good. Um, or I can't masturbate in the bathroom at work, even though it's a private restroom. It's not really a private place because it's a public restroom, even though there's a lock on it, but I still can't masturbate at work. So it's really confusing. Confusion about caregiver relationships. It's not, you can't control really who you have a crush on, but you can't really act on crushes with caregiver relationships because it's a professional relationship. Another thing with the hidden curriculum, it's tough. um, just not having the support needed to develop body autonomy and independence, and teaching consent, non-consensual hugging, such a tough thing. Um, we see hugs all the time, and just non-consensual hugs and non-consensual touching, and not just with students with IDD. I mean, this is, if you go into any high school, you see this all the time. And so how confusing for a lot of those other students. And then, of course, misreading social cues. That's, oh gosh, that's tough for anyone really, but particularly students with IDD. Um, I'm going to shift and get into thinking about some other resources now. And so I guess if there's, as we kind of enter these last 10 minutes of our time together, if there are questions, please send them into the chat box and we can answer them as I share some other resources, and maybe the questions can answer some of that. So I don't know if any questions have come up yet. Lindsay, yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Olivia asked, do you think it's better to teach both genders at the same time or separated?
Ooh, that's such a great question. I strongly suggest all genders together. And a lot of the research is supporting that, because not everybody fits in one of those boxes, right? And so, what if someone doesn't identify as male, female, boy, girl, and maybe they don't even know that. And also, the other thing with all of that is just everyone should learn everything. I have worked with several transition programs, for example, that they teach everyone together, but then they maybe have smaller breakout groups later where they can answer some specific questions. So I know that one transition program, they had like a men's group and a women's group, and whoever identified in those groups came together, but then they could ask questions about periods and things like that. So other questions?
Is there any research that supports that, or is that from personal?
No, there is research, and there's actually, I don't know where the thing is, but I'm sure you could find it easily. But they have found that more bullying happens, boys towards girls or girls towards boys, when they're split. And that's most of the research that they have actually found. So yeah.
Another question is about in supporting special education classrooms where you have individuals who might be above the adult consent age in the same classroom as individuals that are under the consent age. But oftentimes in the special education classrooms, those are the students, that's their peer group. And so that's how they develop the romantic relationships. So in that unique setting, how is that addressed, or do you have any insight on that unique
It's
group
so tricky, right? Like
Yeah.
a question of, like, let's say a 12th grader who's 18 wants to date a ninth grader because they have all the classes together and they're in the same peer group. And it's like, well, what do you mean I can't date this person? They're in all my classes together. We see each other all the time. And it's tricky, but that's where we have to get into some of the rules and to talk about who's safe, healthy, appropriate to date. And unfortunately, one of those things has to be age. And it's tough, but really important to talk about. Yeah.
The other questions in the chat are asking about any Spanish videos or resources, and then also additional interventions besides role plays and worksheets. And since we're short on time, I don't know if you want to talk about the other resources that you have.
Yeah, I will talk about the resources, and most of our resources are in Spanish as well as English. All of our videos have subtitles in both English and Spanish. Our flip books, these little guys, we have them also in Spanish. And a lot of like the Heart of Relationships is in Spanish, and some of our other things. This is another resource that we could get these in Spanish if that is a request of some people. But we have created some social stories and a really simple way to talk about some complex topics. And so these are just a couple, like one on healthy relationships, one on boundaries, but we have social stories on different types of sexual activity, and a really great, helpful way with little images to think through some of those things that no one goes there, right? Like talking about what is oral sex or anal sex and things. And obviously not everyone's going to use that in the classroom at school, but when you have students that come up with these questions, it's a great resource. Some other resources. So we do have a newsletter. Please sign up for that on our website, madhatterwellness.com, or sexualityforallabilities.com. Either one will take you there. And we send out monthly tips, tools, resources. Right now, we're actually in a 6-week email series. So if you sign up now, you'll get that about the heart of relationships. So you'll get that tool and videos that talk about each of the pieces of the heart. We also monthly have calls with educators and instructors, free, to support distance or hybrid learning. So how can you continue teaching sex ed for students with disabilities while we're distant or hybrid? Or obviously if a teacher can join us, if they are teaching in person, that's great too. But we do those, and you can find those on our website. We have an events page, all free. We also have free monthly parent caregiver calls, and that could be a really great resource that you share with your families. I just, in September, hired a parent caregiver education specialist, and I'm so excited to have her because she, great sex ed background, but also is a parent of a child with a disability. So just gets it in a different way. Obviously, we have some other tools on our website. We do lots of consulting. We have our curriculum training. That's, we do training in our curriculums in lots of schools all around the country, into Canada. The link for the YouTube videos is there. So you'll get the PowerPoint, I think, or it'll be on the website with the AUCD website with the video, this recording. So you'll have access to that. I did also in the PowerPoint just put a few resources. There's so many amazing resources, but these are just some. I know that the National Council of Independent Living, NCIL, put out these really great videos that are sex ed videos that were created by people with IDD for people with IDD. Really, really great stuff. So that's a few more. So with that, I guess, we have 5 minutes. Just wondering if there's any other last questions, pressing questions that have come up.
There's also been a question about including the conversations with parents about the importance of sex ed, respecting those differences in values, and how to have implementing the curriculum in a school setting. So having that language, what it look like, and some resources in that area.
So we've been recently with a lot of the schools that we've started working with, it's really thinking about this whole systems approach. So not just training the teachers that are going to be teaching the curriculum, but talking and training and workshopping all staff, so that paras and social workers and school nurse and therapists and everyone is using the same language. And then also having workshops and trainings for the parents and caregivers, because they're the ones that see them as well. And I mean, everybody sees them. And so if we're all using the same language and the same terminology and the same words, it's going to make things so much easier. And then we're all just on the same page. And I think that is so important. And that's, another reason why we're doing these monthly calls, so that parents can feel that support, particularly now when they're the ones that are they're at home with a lot of their students, that they are seeing so much more than they ever did when they were at school before. Any other questions or things?
There's a lot of chatter in the chat about having access to the webinar recording and the slides, as well as the handouts that Katie's been talking about. So I encourage you all to support Lindsay's plea to sign up for the SIG. Our emails are all resource sharing. And then also all of that information will be added to our website. There was a question that came in just now about thinking about LGBTQ plus, having those kind of considerations across different identities. So if you can touch on that for a quick 30 seconds, Katie.
Yeah, right. So important. I just think of, when you're thinking about the language that you're using or scenarios that you're talking through, just remembering to use all genders, maybe more they, them pronouns, never making assumptions, never assume anything about anyone. Everyone identifies differently, we have so many different sexual orientations. And it's just so important that we're recognizing that and teaching that. And so we just went through another update with our curriculum, and I'm super excited. We're in the final editing stages of that. So reach out, please, if you're interested in learning more about our curriculum. But we had people in different communities look through the curriculum to help make it more inclusive. So someone in the LGBTQ community, Black community, Indigenous community. And I feel really great about where we are with this. And it's just super gender inclusive, and racially inclusive. And it feels really good. And I just think whatever you're going to do, just thinking about all of that, as inclusive as you can make anything, is really helpful. So with that, I know we need to close up, and I'm just wondering, before, I think Tanisha needed to close us out, but I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm just thinking, oh, actually here, well, you'll get the slide, but here is my contact info. I was just hoping that we could close with 5 breaths, because sometimes this stuff can bring some things up and we're all excited and wanting to move on and do all this stuff, and it's close, slow down, it's okay, I can contact Katie later, it's fine, here's her phone number, here's her email. Okay, so sitting up tall, take a deep breath in and let it out. Breath in and out. Inhale. 2 more. And last breath, the deepest breath yet today. And let it out. All right. Thank you all so much. I'll stop sharing my screen. And Tanisha, I think you wanted to pop in and say one last thing.
Yes, just thank you so much, Katie, and thank you, Lindsay, for being our amazing co-chairs of the Sexual Health SIG. I see several of you have already requested to join the listserv, so we will see you on there. If there are any follow-up questions, you have contact information for Katie, and the Sexual Health SIG webpage has the contact information for the co-chairs. Thank you all for attending this webinar. The webinar has been recorded and will be archived and shared on the listserv. Jordan shared a link to a survey that we're asking if you can please just complete it and show Katie some love, and also suggest any additional topics that you would like to hear from us. Other than that, stay well.
Thank you.